Platner won the Maine primary, and the headline is NOTUS reporting that Democrats are already scared of the guy they just nominated. Brutal place to start. Welcome to Senate Pickup Watch. Today we're grading Maine, Nebraska, and, in Alaska, a guy named Dan Sullivan running against Dan Sullivan.
And I want to zoom out a bit. We spent the week poking at candidates one by one. Today, I want to know if the map itself is being read wrong.
Plus, Osborn's in Lincoln filing petition signatures today. The deadline I kept flagging isn't hypothetical anymore. It's an actual event. So let's start in Maine. NOTUS doesn't bury it. Democrats are flinching before the general even starts. When your own party is leaking fear about its nominee, Collins doesn't need to write the oppo. You just handed it to her.
Right, but here's the structure. If Maine only moves with a clean, strong recruit, then Platner's baggage tells us the state was Collins vulnerable, not actually blue at the Senate level. And I'll go further than oppo risk. This is a recruiting failure in a realignment cycle. You're nominating an Obama coalition profile in a state where the persuadable voters resent exactly that.
$50 million in national money floating around, and it's chasing the race that generates the most fear headlines. That sums up the allocation problem this cycle.
Which is why Nebraska is more interesting to me than Maine right now.
On that, NBC projects Ricketts wins the Republican primary, so it's officially Osborn versus Ricketts. The matchup's locked, which means the accountability clock starts now.
The Alaska thing. Sullivan versus Sullivan. Everybody's laughing.
Democrats won't take the Senate without one surprise pickup in a state they've written off. After this week, I'm more sure the surprise isn't coming from the race they're spending the most money and anxiety on. Igor Bobik, Krista Dutton, Alex Rorty, writing in NOTUS.
Blue Hill, Maine. Democrats are projecting public confidence about the Maine Senate race in the wake of Graham Platner's primary victory on Tuesday, insisting they can defeat incumbent Senator Susan Collins in November. Privately, however, many in the party are despondent about his chances, believing that his personal baggage has put a winnable race at risk and upended their path to securing a Senate majority next year.
All week, I was asking whether Platner was viable. NOTUS pretty much answered it for me. He's the nominee, and Democrats are privately despondent before the general even starts. When your own donors and operatives are wondering whether it's worth it, you're not dealing with a little confidence wobble. The recruiting failed. They handed Collins a 5-term incumbent's dream draw.
But here's what I keep circling, Sarah. Is this Platner specifically, or is it that the party keeps recruiting for a coalition that doesn't fit the state they're running in? Because look at the tell in that piece. They're already shifting money to Iowa and Texas. Maine just went from a pickup to a write-off in the span of one primary night.
And that's the whole pattern, Rich. $50 million in national money goes to the shiny names, and the second the nominee gets messy, they bolt for harder ground.
Maine has gone Democratic in presidential races, so why does Susan Collins keep winning? And does her whole "I'm not really a Trump Republican" brand actually move the needle enough to keep her there?
Yeah, that's the tension in this race. Collins is hard to beat for a few reasons that pile on top of each other. She chairs the Senate Appropriations Committee, and per reporting from multiple outlets, that makes her a gatekeeper on the federal budget and helps her steer billions back to Maine. Voters can actually feel that. Her independent brand also has a record behind it. She's defied her party on high-profile votes before, and AP reporting this week makes the point that the posture that ended other Republicans' careers can be a survival tool in a blue-leaning state like Maine. And Democrats still have the Sarah Gideon hangover from 2020, Senate leadership's top recruit, a huge fundraising edge, and still a bad collapse, which the Boston Globe is tying to the current race. Now they've got Graham Platner, a combat veteran and oyster farmer, and Sabato's crystal ball moved Maine from leans Republican to toss-up back in October, so yes, it's competitive. Collins just has advantages the polls don't fully catch.
If it's a toss-up, what does the money look like? Is anyone actually prepared to fight at the scale Collins will have behind her?
On the Republican side, the Senate Leadership Fund, the top Republican super PAC, has already committed $42 million to Collins. The Boston Globe flagged that as the largest single-state commitment the group has ever made, and both sides expect hundreds of millions total before it's over. So the money problem is brutal. You're running against Collins, her incumbency, her appropriations leverage, and a war chest that says national Republicans view this seat as non-negotiable. The next real tells are the DSCC's counterinvestment and Platner's Q2 fundraising numbers. That'll show whether Democrats still believe this toss-up rating holds. NorfolkNewRadio.com with Dan Osborn.
Independent candidate for U.S. Senate Dan Osborn will give public remarks at a press conference in Lincoln prior to his campaign submitting the petition signatures required for Osborn to officially qualify for the November ballot.
So here it is. 10 a.m. at the Cornhusker Office Plaza. Osborn walks in with petition signatures. All week I've been flagging the petition lane as the next real deadline, and now it's an event.
And this is the first thing he's done that isn't a poll or a press release. Filing signatures is an actual operational act. Somebody had to go collect those names across the state.
Right, and ballot access just gets him through the door. Now I want the in-state fundraising number because that's the next gate, and it's a real one.
Here's what I'm chewing on, Sarah. Does the independent lane have a floor, or is it still just appetite? Signatures prove people will sign a clipboard. They don't prove there's an organization underneath.
Signatures are the cheapest signal there is, volunteers and a free pen. The expensive signal is a finance report, and we don't have one yet.
But notice the contrast with the segment we just hit. Democrats scared of their own nominee in Maine. Osborn skipped the machine entirely. No party to be scared of him. That's either his structural strength or the thing that leaves him with no scaffolding when the money fight starts.
NBC News is tracking this. It's official now. Pete Ricketts takes the Nebraska Republican primary at 81.5%, with basically all the votes in. The matchup we've been circling all week is locked.
And notice what's not on this ballot. Osborn isn't in either column. He's working the petition lane, filing signatures in Lincoln. So on the party ballots, it's Ricketts versus Cindy Burbank, who won the Democratic side with 89.5%.
Right, and Burbank winning the Democratic primary is almost beside the point. The general election to watch is Osborn against a sitting Ricketts with the family name and the family money. The accountability clock starts today.
My read? Ricketts getting 81.5 against two no-names mostly tells you the primary was empty. What we need to know is whether Nebraska voters actually wanted a third option, and the petition filing we heard about tests whether that appetite has a floor or just a vibe.
Agreed. Ballot access gets him started. It doesn't prove the campaign. He clears the signatures fine. Now I want the in-state fundraising number against Ricketts money. That's the next live gate, and the clock's running. Alex DeMarban, writing in Anchorage Daily News.
The Dan Sullivan from Southeast Alaska, who hopes to unseat the U.S. Senator of the same name, said in an interview Monday that he's a legitimate Republican candidate who's not trying to trick voters. "I am eligible to run," said Dan J. Sullivan, 69. "I filed the paperwork on time. I paid my $100. If my name was Charlie Brown, would there be a lawsuit? So my name is my name. Always has been."
So, in Alaska, there are now two Dan Sullivans on the August 18 ballot. And the incumbent's lawyers want the retired teacher from Petersburg gone. The guy's quote is great. "If my name was Charlie Brown, would there be a lawsuit?"
He paid his $100 and filed on time. That's the whole crime.
Here's why I won't laugh it off. Alaska runs a jungle primary, everybody on one ballot. So two Dan Sullivans can genuinely split the incumbent's vote. And in a low-density state where polling already runs friendly to the incumbent, that's exactly the kind of noise that makes Sullivan's numbers unreadable.
And look who's panicking. The NRSC ran to the FEC last week. National Republicans flinching over a Petersburg schoolteacher tells you they don't trust their own margin against Peltola.
That's the tell I care about. You don't sue over a name unless the underlying race is closer than you'd ever admit on TV.
If Senate Pickup Watch helps you keep track of the map, take a moment to subscribe or leave a quick review wherever you're listening. It really helps other people find the show. We've put links to every story from today's briefing in the show notes, so if one of them caught your ear, you can dig in there. That's Senate Pickup Watch for today. This is a Lantern podcast.